Hello, everyone. This is Sana, and this is like I guess it's my third Instagram Live. And I'm so excited because I have a really interesting guest today. And I'm so excited to share the information that she has with all of you, whoever might watch in the future. I have a podcast called Center Her Power. And the podcast is designed to provide divine feminine soul food for everyone who, especially women, who are looking to figure out how the divine feminine can work in their lives. So I'm talking to various people, primarily women, who are doing interesting things with the divine feminine energy. So the podcast has a broad range of topics. I say that it's in the spirituality area because I see this as a spiritual work, but really the work is being done by women who are not necessarily primarily spiritual. Like, it's not necessarily for them a spiritual work, but it is work is inviting Tara to join us. Hey, Tara, how are you?
Hey, how are you, Sana?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. I was just kind of telling people that I host a podcast called Center Her Power, and I interviewed you for the podcast, and we had such a great conversation, and I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, there were some technical difficulties. Now I'm assuming that there was no user error, but, we'll just say it was technical difficulties. But actually, so the audio didn't come out as good as I wanted. So, but I had already promoted you and said that you were going to be coming on, and I had paired two podcasts, your interview and another interview, and both of you were looking at the mother and how, and that relationship, and how it is impacting us, and how it has impacted you in a particular way, and how it impacted her in a particular way. So I wanted to be able to bring you on to talk about it. So I'm with Tara Moreno, and she is a Reiki master extraordinaire. She is doing really innovative things related to recovery and addictions, and she works in Flint, Michigan. So woo-hoo, Flint. I'm a Detroiter, so I gotta give some love for my Michiganders, especially those who are on the front lines in the city. So, Tara, tell us about Reiki and what there's a recovery Reiki that you discovered and invented. Tell us about that. And tell us, and as we go along, you can tell us more about the Serenity House and all the different things that you're engaged in. But I think what's really important that I really want to get out is how you're utilizing healing divine feminine energy in a very unique way.
Yeah.
So I think Tara froze for a minute. There we are. Okay.
So Reiki, the basics of Reiki, it's universal life force energy. So it's really being able to get in tune with the universe, with source energy, with God, Allah, whatever you call it, to be able to channel that energy, to have it flow through you, and to be able to Reiki's about. It's about having this intention, and this intention to heal addiction and the codependency that is under addiction and the trauma. So underneath all of these layers, it's trauma, right?
Yes. So, one of the things you mentioned, which I accept, right now I'm working the Sugar Addicts Recovery Plan. Can you hear me?
I can. So I don't
Okay.
know. Yeah. Is it my connection? Let me see.
I think you're kind of freezing periodically.
Okay. Let me see. I just put a grounding mat underneath my workstation. I wonder if that's causing some of the issues. So let me just adjust.
Okay, so while you do that, I am also a Reiki master, although I don't practice very much. But I really do think that addictions are universal. I mean, I can definitely say that I have an addiction to sugar, and I know for sure that it's tied to shadow work, well, shadows, beliefs that I adapted and as a child and as an adult, and then decided that this was going to be my method for taking the place of whatever. So I'm right now working the Sugar Addicts Recovery Plan. I think this is let's see, maybe the 20th time. Don't quit quitting. That's not me about cigarette smoke. Don't quit quitting. So tell us a little bit about how you even came to think about Reiki in the context of recovery.
Yeah, so I am in long-term recovery, and
Okay.
I've been working on myself for over a decade now. And I started with the traditional approaches to recovery. And, that included 12 steps. It included, I went to rehab in 2007, and it only took me so far. So I was able, thank God, to be able to get some sort of semblance of recovery through the 12 steps. But I was still heavily medicated. I was on medications for a diagnosis of bipolar 2 disorder. I had ADHD, different uh, different different maladies that I couldn't heal.
And I know that there are a lot of people who have been raised on ADHD medication. And then we know, of course, that there has been an epidemic of opioid addiction. And it's really interesting that the opioid addiction is given a root. I mean, it is different, but we've had stages of addiction, a large number of people who were addicted in this country, and the way that they're treated is different. So there's what seems to be a lot of compassion for those who are addicted to opioid. There should be compassion for everyone who has some sort of addiction, because many of us are surviving based on our addiction, whether it's drinking, TV, which is something that you were telling me also.
Yeah, addiction is everywhere. This world is built to get you addicted to something, so that you continuously look outside of yourself for, something outside of yourself.
Right.
And that's, really it's getting inside of yourself and that internal pathway to what I say, the kingdom of heaven within you, right? That eternal peace that,
the kingdom of heaven is within us.
yeah.
And that's the secret that they don't want us to realize, not just know, but actually live. Not
Yeah.
they, but the systems.
The systems.
Right.
The systems are designed to keep you addicted and feeling
Right.
crappy about yourself. And here's toxic food, and here are these pharmaceutical medications, and all of these things to keep grasping outside of disempowerment. That's really what it's about.
So that others can have power over you.
Yes. So that, and we are in a system that is built like that. It's been designed this way. And that's really what it's about, is to take our power back and to know that, we are these amazing beings of gods and goddesses. We really are. And to be able to, though, balance that with our humanness as well, right? And to be able to, oscillate between being fully human and fully divine.
Yes, and so eventually, so that we act, so to be fully human is to be divine. So that the both, really what we're looking, I think what Ascension is about, is actually accepting into your heart and living in your being that we are both human flesh as well as divine. And the goal is for us to marry our spiritual selves with the divine, of the divine, and so that we're these humans who have been Christed, basically, who have evolved to a state where we are connected to the cosmos, to the earth. We energetically and intuitively are able to communicate and work in union with the earth, and help to adjust the tides and the weather. And we really are designed to I think the ultimate goal of God is for us to shine with the light of God in us. And I know that whole concept can be really difficult to even accept. I said something like that to a guy earlier this week, and he said, "Okay, we just can't even talk anymore because." He said, "We can't even talk anymore because the Bible says blah 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 blah." So, so how did you get into recovery, Reiki? You said you've been in recovery for a number of years, and so that means you have had some challenges with addictions at one point.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm freezing, I think, again. Can you see me?
Yes, yes. And I was trying to talk. So when I see you are about to freeze, I try to talk so that we're not waiting. But I don't want to talk over you. But I'm trying.
I know. I think I
Yes.
should get off my internet. That's what I think I need to do. So,
Oh, really?
yeah. So, but
Okay.
so with the recovery Reiki, I didn't know what I was doing when I was doing it. It started building its own self. I was teaching more than just energy medicine. I was teaching whole person health through the recovery Reiki.
Okay.
Not just the energy medicine, but the gut health, and how your gut health is tied to the spiritual world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that good bacteria and the bad bacteria they actually work with these spiritual energies
Mm-hmm.
that are around us.
Mm-hmm.
And to really look at all these different pieces, financial health, like how do we do a business of Reiki, right? How do we, get clients? How do we track data? That comes in the master teacher level, something that I wasn't taught. I had to learn myself.
So wait. So you have a whole training program. So recovery Reiki is like a whole practitioner training program.
It is. So
Okay.
it's a level 1, 2, and 3. The 1 is all around self-healing and emotional mastery. We talk all about emotions, where they exist in the body, the pain body, which is Eckhart Tolle's term to identify that pain or those emotions that are trapped in our body, and how to begin to release them so that we can live in more of a joy, peaceful existence. So that's the 1. The 2 is all around mental. So Byron Katie, we talk about Byron Katie a lot, about how to question thoughts, and how to break them down in a way where we can, really not get caught in the drama of that thought, because that's what it does, right? So we have this repetitive belief, these thoughts that turn into a belief, and then we get taken into this story that's untrue, right?
Right.
So, and to be able to break that down. And then in 2, we also learn how to hold groups. So distance healing is all around the Usui Reiki in level 2 with the symbols. So what we do is we take that Usui Reiki and take it a step further, and we actually have a group preamble that every time you go to a group, you know exactly what you're stepping into.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all with the intention of healing the addiction, codependency, and trauma, and to share your experiences and not feel shamed over it. Because too often we feel shame about sharing that we're struggling, especially around other people. And to know that we're not alone. And I think that's one of the biggest lies that we have on this earth, is that we feel so alone and we're so isolated. And we're really not. Like, we're all of one. There is really no thought that has never been thought before. It's just kind of picking out, in the etheric realm, based on your vibration, as I say.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And the higher you vibrate, the higher you attract more positive thoughts to you. Um, and then to really, break it down, like, we get into this whole manifestation aspect of the new age. And I really want to caution people that, if you feel a negative emotion, you're not going to attract that to you if there's an intention there to and begin to break it down, right? Like, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? What is this thought doing? Like, that's the work right there. Not to like bypass and say, oh, like it's all love and light, and it's the shadow. The pain body is part of who we are. They're the denied aspects of self that we
Yes.
push down.
And the pain body, and I read Eckhart Tolle, and the pain body and our shadows are really designed to help us to know ourselves more completely and more deeply. Because we really are here in this plane where light and dark interplay. And we have light and dark within us, and there's always duality. So it's important to realize that.
Yep, it is, because we are human, and that's that fully human and fully divine aspect. And if we just want to go to the love and light, and that's why we get a lot of people. I mean, you hear these, pastors that are stealing like, millions of dollars from the church, or these priests that are, molesting these children. And you're getting these people that are just striving towards the light. And it's like, no, like you have to go into the parts of self that you have been denying, or that you've been shamed about, whether internally or externally, and bring those into the light, so that we can heal.
So how does recovery Reiki help when we are led to go back to our addiction, like when I want a piece of candy? Like, does it help in that specific of a way?
Yeah. So what you do is it's all about feeling, or like I said, breaking down the thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
So feeling and noticing where you feel it in the body,
Mm-hmm.
right? And beginning to just sit with it and sit with it and sit with it until it begins to release itself, or you can get some mastery where you can release it yourself.
So wait a minute, you want me to sit with the uncomfortability? You know what? I have spent so much time, trying, I have there were some things that made me uncomfortable that I was comfortable holding. Like, these were my things, my burdens, my wounds. And I wanted people to know that these are my wounds. And see, I have these wounds. But then there are other things that I just really don't want to deal with. I don't want to look at them. So how do we deal with that?
So it takes a level of, you have to be ready, right? And you really have to be ready. And, there are two ways you can do it. You can either go looking for it, and you can consciously begin to look at your memories, your childhood trauma, and begin digging into it. Or you can just sit and watch your reality and see what shows up, because there's lots of triggers in our reality. And those triggers are just connected to things in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see this by patterning. Like when you have a different person that shows up, but you feel the same exact way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Different guy, same things happening. Like that's the pattern, right? So you know that there's a tie into your history that needs to be that root needs to be pulled out, so that a healthy relationship can grow in its place.
Right, right. Tell us about the Serenity House of Flint.
Yeah, so it's a nonprofit that I founded. It'll be 7 years in March. And it's all around helping people heal from addiction, codependency, and trauma. Our mission is to advocate for people in recovery because of the stigma, because people don't want to talk about addiction, and that in itself prevents people from healing. Like if you can't talk
Yeah.
about it'll just grow in the dark.
The stigma itself, I think, is enough to push people back toward the addiction, because when it's interesting how we look at. I would see myself look at someone and say, "Oh wow, heroin. He shot up, and that was like, oh, that's really something that I don't really want to see. Also, but I still see evidence of addictions like especially throughout my childhood. Pretty much all of my friends' fathers were functional alcohol. I wouldn't say functional alcoholics, but they drank every day. Came home from the factory, drank, got drunk, and then got up the next morning and went to work. That's kind of the reality, I think, for a lot of people, especially in the Rust Belt.
Yeah, I mean, that was my life too, right? In Flint, my dad was a shop worker, and that's what I learned, right? The party and the second shift, and all these things that came with living in a dysfunctional family. Yeah, I mean, addiction is really weird because this the denial aspect of it, and the inability to see that you're even addicted. I mean, that is the hardest piece right there, because you can be walking around with no teeth in your head, haven't showered in weeks, and you're okay.
Oh, what? Wait, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have laughed at that, because that is some people's reality.
It is. It is. And, and then coming to a point where you're faced with your, either certain things, right? Like you're in the hospital and people will go out and, leave to go shoot up, or, for my story, my life was in shambles, and I couldn't imagine my life without alcohol. It was very difficult for me to ever even think that I could live a life without drinking, because I had built my whole life around it. It was, when was I going to drink? And I didn't drink every day. But I socialized and I danced and I loved the club, and I had all these relationships, and that's
when did you
supports are so important.
Right. So I wanted to ask you, when did you first feel connected to alcohol? Because I know in my family, my mother and stepfather have bottles and bottles of liquor. They went to the liquor store. Maybe I don't know how often they went. Maybe it was once a month. And they left the liquor store with boxes of liquor. And when my mother passed away, there were like all these bottles of liquor. They like to be able to have different kinds of liquor for people to have, I guess, whenever they came to visit. But it was all around, and I just never really got into it. But it would have been very easy to accept that as just a way of life. How did you first come into contact with alcohol?
Well, I was raised around it. My dad is still an active alcoholic, and my mother still drinks occasionally. And I swore what I was saying is like, I'm never going to be like this, never going to be like this. And then when my dad left the home when I was 14, that was when I had my first drink, and the party that was attached to it for me. I've always loved people, and the socializing of it. And, I started drinking and I started smoking pot when I was 14, 15, and it was all fun and games for me. And I went to college, Michigan State, and then, I delved deeper into it there. And it just like they said, right? It's just sneaky. It sneaks right up on you, right? Like I never thought in a million years that I would become an addict or alcoholic, or a person with alcoholism, or a person with addiction.
And so
all the
you
wheels
partied at school.
Began to fall off, and I just went in this downward spiral, and I couldn't get out. And my mental health, though, started to suffer, and that was the first indication for me that something was happening to me.
Now, let me ask you. I know you had a child somewhere in here. Do you think that postpartum depression was impacted your addiction?
Oh, absolutely.
Your former addiction?
Oh, absolutely. When I was pregnant with her, I stayed sober. And as soon as I even had any indication that I was pregnant, I stopped using everything. And I tried so hard, to just make sure that she was taken care of in my womb. And when she was 3 months old, I had postpartum depression, and it was psychosis. At the time, I didn't realize it, but I had these thoughts of hurting her, and it scared me to death. And I went to a psychiatrist, I went to a therapist, and immediately they put me on something called Klonopin. And because of my issues with alcohol, what that drug does is it impacts the same part of the brain that alcohol does. So when she was 3 months old, I was back out, I was drinking, and I relapsed and using cocaine. So there was a screening process that didn't happen the way that it should have.
So Klonopin, what is the impact that it has on the brain?
It impacts the same part of the brain that alcohol does.
So does it make you want more alcohol?
Yep.
Okay. It's so the craving, it exacerbates the cravings.
Yep.
Okay.
And I had no idea. I didn't know. And like I said, the screening, and this psychiatrist was like writing me scripts and handing them out. His like assistant was handing them out at the right.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness.
So that's kind of what and then the relationship I was in, it was very, very codependent, and it was very toxic. So all of that really sent me further into a downward spiral. We went to court, family court, over her, and we spent 2 years in family court. We both used together, but he was more functional than I was, and I was carrying a lot more trauma around, and I couldn't maintain my sobriety through the court hearings. And he ended up getting temporary custody of her, and then I went to rehab. And when I went to rehab, he went back to court and got full custody when I was in treatment. And once that custody was taken, it's nearly impossible to get custody back.
Yeah, I mean, and then emotionally, it had to have been really difficult. Here's this child, this person that was actually in your body, a part of your body at one time, and now you have to call and make an appointment to see her. That had to have been difficult. I think we often think about motherhood as like this pristine situation where the woman is like doing her. I mean, it is a wonderful, mystical, magical thing to conceive and give birth. However, it's not always a situation where everything is peaches and cream. And what would you say to that myth that we have in this culture that that if a woman is an upstanding mother, that's all she needs, that she's at the epitome of her usefulness?
Yeah, so I think that we need to really get real about our systems in place right now. So the hospitals don't really support birth in a way that we need to be supported. I had very traumatic experiences with both my children. After Peyton was born, I had to write my daughter. I wrote a letter because I had abuse that essentially happened from the nurses and from the doctor.
Wow, really?
Yes. And they wrote me an apology letter. So these are the kinds of things that I've heard from other women too, right? So there's a lack of support, making sure that a lot of women are in recovery, and making sure that, they put me on morphine after my son was born. And I was like, you can't give this to me. And doing more of a screening process, right? And having more support. We as women, we've had red tents in the past. I mean, we had tribes of women that supported each other, and we weren't meant to do a little newborn baby alone. Like, we had sisters and friends that could help us with all the things that needed to be done around the home and with the baby, you know, so that the mother can bond with the baby.
Mm-hmm.
You know, bonding with that baby. I know for me, you know, my motherhood, it was a process. Like my motherhood, I loved my children more and more over time. It wasn't like they just came out of my body and it was like, oh my God, I'm so in love with you. It was like, okay, like you are in my body. Now we're going to get to know each other. And it was,
Well, and if you had a traumatic birth situation, then you have to really get over that trauma, I would imagine, in order to be able to allow the love to flow.
exactly.
So, thank you so much for sharing this, because you're being very courageous. Most women never want to admit that they had anything but the perfect love for their child. And I know from my own mother that that's not true. But you love how you as well as you can. You love as well as you can based on the situation. What do you think was the spiritual, or is the spiritual lesson or wound that you are processing around motherhood? Because what you're processing for so many other women, and you coming out and speaking about it is so can be transformational for so many people. So what do you think is the spiritual lesson
so,
around your motherhood?
so both of my children were catalysts for my healing. I know
Okay.
that much. So when Peyton was born, I call her my recovery baby. So she was the reason why I was able to begin getting sober, right? I knew that I needed to get sober for her because I kept thinking, oh my God, if she were to lose her mother, because I was close to death and I had almost died a few times before I started getting the recovery. My son Anderson was my holistic baby. So he ushered in the, learning about nutrition for both of our health, about energy medicine, because I wanted to figure out why did he have food allergies. I didn't know that I had food intolerances and allergies. And so these, children are catalyst for the mother, right? You become the mother, right? It's a rite of passage that this child brings into your life if we allow it, right? And having that right support system. Unfortunately, we're having these women who are traumatized having children and they're passing on the trauma, and it's like all of this lack of awareness that's happening. With my motherhood, really getting in touch with my own inner child has been, I'm finally in a place where I can say I'm a good mother, I'm a solid mother. And I, with my son, I homeschool, and I do that because I want to make sure that he is safe and that I'm teaching him and he knows that I am the spire as his leader, and not having like all of these external influences like these peers or these other teachers, and being very mindful of who I allow to teach him, right?
Mm-hmm.
uh yeah, I mean, it is so hard, and I am not even going to sugarcoat this. It has been such a hard journey for me to even get to a place to kind of transmute some of that guilt and shame that the mother carries. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
mother, we carry so much emotional baggage from our families, and this guilt that we're not doing enough. We're not enough and we're not doing enough. And, trying to take care of ourselves and take care of children. I mean, it is incredibly difficult and takes a lot of balance, especially when we're removed from the tribe. So
Mm-hmm.
we're in single family homes. We don't have a tribe anymore, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
It's true. It's really true. I have a friend who passed away. Her name was Samara, and Samara had, um, I think she had motherhood for her. I think was happy in a lot of ways, but it was also fraught with a lot of sadness. And unfortunately, and it seemed like her 3 children were born for their fathers, and because they ended up with their fathers. And her youngest child, she was, I think, maybe 10 or 11 when my friend Samara passed away. However, in the community, she was a person and really pulled together that tribe and really supported women. I mean, and she was known as Mama Samara, and she mothered, people in so many ways, and created community in so many ways because of, I think, some of the challenges she had with her family and being a mother. And when I look at Samara and her example, I think one of the examples that I see is how challenging motherhood can be. And she never wanted to be a single parent, and yet sometimes she, I think, found herself kind of with the only one, even though she has a lot to give. So how do you think we recreate the communities? I know I've done it a little bit with belly dancing and the belly dancing activities that I used to have in the past, but how do you think we recreate communities?
Well, I mean, it's about gathering and these rites of passage, and to be able to be together in a way where we can be interdependent and not codependent.
Mm-hmm.
So being individuals within the tribe, right? The biggest problem we have right now is this dependency on systems, and we need to get inside of ourselves and having that firm connection to within, to be able to commune in a healthy way with other people in the community, or else it just turns into a lot of like dysfunction or a lot of toxicity. What we
Right.
want, right? We want to be able to have these hard conversations and not have like yelling and or not abuse, right? Or disrespect, but we want to be able to have conflict resolution that's in a respectful way, because that's how we grow. We grow and we learn each other and our boundaries through disagreement. It doesn't have to be an end all. It doesn't have to be like this big blowout thing. It can be a toxic family. But to be able to do these practices, rites of passage, healthy conflict resolution, gathering with like-minded people, doing things that are healthy, too often we gather with the alcohol and the sports and the MMA, and we're going out and we're, like all these addictions. It's like, can we just sit together, like in a sober setting and watch each other weep? Can we just be with each other while we're going through things? And then that's where the joy comes in, right?
Yes.
So when you can be with each other, then you can laugh. It comes from the same well, the joy and the tears. It's feeling, right? It's just the flip of it.
Yes. There's a Khalil Gibran poem that talks about joy and sorrow and how the two are linked. 2 questions before I let you go. One, and I want you to tell us how you're creating community with the retreats that you host. How are you faring right now with your daughter, and how are you all healing together as mother and daughter? The mother relationship is just, after I talked to you a couple of months ago, I just thought about how impactful the mother relationship is for everyone. And even though you may bond with the opposite sex parent, what the mother does or doesn't do in your perception is so fundamental to who we are in life. And it's an ever processing, to me. It's if you allow it, it's an ever growing, ever processing, ever shifting relationship. So how are you mothering at this point with your daughter, who was raised with?
So she is 17. So she is very, very angry right now. She's very angry with me and angry at the situation of how things worked out. And this is a very Our teenagers need a lot of support and help. We have created these teens, they're very angry because they've lost connection. Um, and I'm seeing my daughter kind of, you know, her peers are the most important thing to her right now, you know, and they're kind of raising each other.
Yeah, I was really close to my peers, like after college though, but so what kind of connection do you think a lot of young people have lost?
Well, I think that they've lost sense of self. I mean, I think we all have in some ways, but we've lost this rite of passage, right? So, not, when a girl becomes a woman and letting go of that girlhood to be able to transition into a young woman, with the menstruation, right? I mean, that's just kind of shoved in the closet. Like we hide the sanitary napkins and we don't really talk about it. And it's like, we need to bring rites of passage back for women, for young women,
For women
men
in general, because we
yeah,
need to have a rites of passage into menopause too.
that too.
Because
Yeah.
and really it should be looked at as a continuum. So
Yep.
so when we're doing the rites of passage for the girls need to understand these are the phases of life.
Yes.
And this is all of it, because because I did a show about menopause, but so often you get to either you get to be 17 and you're about to go out into the world, or you get to be into menopause and you are near menopause and you're like, what's going on? What do I do? How do I make, you're right, we really do need a rites of passage. I'm actually working on a grant called Passing the Torch, Preserving the Flame. And part of what we're going to be doing is utilizing women's ways and women's in community to help to build social and political power, and utilizing ritual and art and women's ways to bring community together and build social and political power, because we so it's important to talk about love and light and to do the practices. And it's now important for us to take the practices that we've learned and utilize them to shift our lives, to shift the world, to shift the systems with the power of love and light infusing us. So well, we just hope that your daughter, should. Well, I was really angry with my mother at 17 too.
I know, so was I. So I'm just like, and I have her picture on my altar, and I just send her prayers and I send her love and I set boundaries, right? Like something I was never given boundaries as a teenager. And I wonder how that would have impacted me if my mom would have said, no in certain aspects. So it's very difficult, but I trust that she comes from me, and I know, the power that I have within me. And I sense that she has a similar power as well. So she's going to be okay. And it's just this phase of trusting the process and praying and meditating and using my tools and all of that stuff, and focusing on the child I do have at home, and channeling that energy where I can right now. So that's my children. But a beautiful thing that we have going on, my husband and I. So we have a organization. I have an LLC, or a for-profit as well. And we host our recovery Reiki trainings, emotional freedom technique trainings. And we also have a retreat in Costa Rica that's coming up in February 2022.
Okay, so February. I thought it was in the fall. Okay.
Yeah. So it is a 9-day, 8-night healing yoga, restorative yoga retreat with 3 excursions: waterfall hiking and swimming and snorkeling, and an ATV tour through Rainmaker Park, and then staying in this beautiful retreat center with the pool near the ocean, Pacific Ocean. And it is our first retreat that we are planning. And it's been a dream of ours because we have made this trip together a couple of times. This will be my 5th time going to Manuel Antonio, Costa Rica, and it has changed the fabric of my being. Costa Rica is an incredible country. It's hard to put into words. It has to be experienced. But for people who are interested in that aspect, they can visit www.retreat CostaRicaHealing.com. And for those who are interested in Flint Serenity House, they can visit www.flintserenityhouse.org.
Thank you so much, Tara. I really appreciate you. And we're gonna end the live, and I'm sure the retreat's gonna be wonderful. Thank you so much for all that you shared. And if people want to follow you, what is your what is your Instagram, Tara?
Tara Y Moreno. So it's tara.y.moreno.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tara.
Thank
Have
you.
a good one.
Yes, you too, Sana. Bye.
Bye-bye.